For 300 years, a series of 5 dynasties, ruling from the city of Delhi, created an empire that would forever change the Indian subcontinent. It's a story packed with conquests, amazing cultural fusion, and some of the most unlikely rulers you'll ever hear about. So let's get into it. This is the Delhi Sultanate.
And that's really the big question here, isn't it? I mean, this wasn't your typical empire, born from some long, unbroken royal line. No, this was forged in the heat of battle, often by men who literally started their lives as slaves. So how on earth did they build something that lasted 3 centuries? That's what we're going to figure out. All right, here's our game plan. We'll start at the very beginning with how the empire was forged. Then we'll see how it expanded. We'll look at the Tughlaqs, a real high point and a turning point. Then we'll cover its slow decline, and finally, we'll unpack the incredible legacy it left behind.
Okay, first up, the beginning. And the thing is, the Sultanate didn't just appear out of nowhere in Delhi. Its roots actually go back a bit farther west, with a group called the Ghurids. What they started really set the stage for everything else.
So this is where the story gets really wild. It kicks off after a key Ghurid victory in 1192. Their sultan put his top generals in charge of his new Indian territories. Now, these weren't just any generals, they were Mamluks, or slave soldiers. When the sultan died, one of them, Qutb-ud-Din Aibak, saw his chance, declared independence, and boom, the Delhi Sultanate was born. That's why it's called the Slave Dynasty. His successor, Iltutmish, really locked things down, and then came his daughter, the incredible Razia Sultana, one of the only women to ever rule. After her, a tough-as-nails ruler named Balban came in and basically crushed the power of the nobles to make sure the sultan was the one and only boss.
So in these early days, what did the Sultanate actually look like? Well, it was mostly a northern Indian power. They had a death grip on the super-strategic and fertile Gangetic plains, with Delhi as their fortress capital. You can think of this area as the launch pad for everything that was about to happen next.
And that brings us to our second dynasty, the Khaljis. And here's where the story kicks into high gear. If the Mamluks built the foundation, the Khaljis were the ones who blew the doors wide open. They were seen as outsiders, so they had a lot to prove.
And boy, did they prove it. The Khalji era was actually pretty short, only about 30 years, but it was absolutely explosive. Their armies didn't just march, they stormed south, breaking out of that northern heartland and pushing deep into southern India, conquering lands that no Delhi-based power had ever touched before.
The mastermind behind all this was a guy named Alauddin Khalji, part military genius, part absolute tyrant. He needed a giant army, right? Both for conquering the south and for fighting off Mongol invasions. So how do you pay for it? Well, his solution was radical. First, he jacked up the land tax to a staggering 50%. Then, he basically took over the entire economy, setting up state-controlled markets with prices he fixed himself. And to make sure everyone followed the rules, he had a massive network of spies. He even banned his nobles from partying together so they couldn't plot against him. Talk about a control freak.
And all this conquest, it brought in just unimaginable amounts of wealth. Aladdin's top general, Malik Kafur, who, by the way, was also a former slave, led these campaigns, plundering the southern kingdoms. The loot from just one city, Warangal, is said to have included the legendary Koh-i-Noor diamond, a jewel that would become a symbol of immense power for centuries to come.
Okay, so after the explosive Khaljis, we get to the Tughlaqs. And this is where the Sultanate hits its absolute peak. We're talking a true subcontinental empire. But it's also a classic story of flying too close to the sun. The Tughlaq era is this great paradox. It's the highest of highs and the beginning of the end.
I mean, just look at this map. It really says it all. Under the Tughlaqs, the empire stretched as far as it would ever go. Almost the entire Indian subcontinent was under their control. This was it, peak Sultanate.
But the sultan in charge, Muhammad bin Tughlaq, was a man of huge ideas that often ended in, well, disaster. His most infamous project was moving the capital. On paper, the idea to create a second capital way down south in Dolatabad kind of made sense for controlling his new territories. But the execution? He forced the entire elite of Delhi to march hundreds of miles south. It caused untold misery, made the nobles furious, and in the end, the whole project was a complete failure.
And if you thought that was bad, he followed it up with another brilliant idea, token currency. He tried to make cheap brass and copper coins legally worth the same as silver and gold ones. A fascinating idea, maybe, but way ahead of its time. What do you think happened? Well, everyone just started making their own coins at home. The forgery was so widespread that the economy completely collapsed. The government went bankrupt trying to buy back all the fakes, sparking famines and rebellions all across the empire.
So as you can imagine, these massive blunders seriously weakened the empire. It was starting to fray at the edges. Rebellions were popping up everywhere. The Sultanate was shrinking and vulnerable. And that's when it got hit with a knockout punch from the outside.
That punch was delivered by the Central Asian conqueror Timur, also known as Tamerlane. He heard that the Sultanate was weak and divided, and he basically smelled blood in the water. He wasn't there to conquer and rule. He was there to smash, grab, and leave. When Timur's army reached Delhi, it was an absolute catastrophe. They unleashed total horror on the city. An estimated 100,000 people were massacred. The city was looted, burned, and left in ruins. This single event was a blow from which the Delhi Sultanate would never, ever fully recover.
What came next was basically a slow fade to black. The Sayyid dynasty that followed ruled over just a shadow of the former empire. Then came the Lodis, who managed a bit of a comeback, but the grand old days were long gone. The final curtain fell in 1526. Another invader from Central Asia, this time a guy named Babur, who is actually a descendant of Timur, came down and defeated the last Lodi Sultan. And with that, the Delhi Sultanate was over, and the age of a new power, the Mughal Empire, had begun.
But you can't just erase 300 years of history. To say the Sultanate just ended would be missing the point entirely. Its impact was profound, and its fingerprints are still all over the culture of the Indian subcontinent today.
I mean, just look at this list. They created a whole new style of architecture, a beautiful blend of Indian and Islamic traditions. Just look at the Qutb Minar in Delhi. They helped create the Hindustani language, which is spoken by hundreds of millions of people today. They plugged India into huge international trade and cultural networks. And here's a big one people often forget. They stopped the Mongol hordes from invading India, saving the subcontinent from the kind of destruction that wiped out so many other places. Even the administrative system they built was used as a blueprint by the Mughals who came after them.
So, this leaves us with a really complex picture. There's no denying the history of brutal warfare and destruction. But at the same time, this was an era of incredible cultural fusion and artistic creation. It brought new people, new ideas, and new art into the subcontinent. So, was it an age of oppression, or was it the painful, messy birth of a new multicultural society? The real answer is probably, and almost always is, somewhere in the middle. Of course, the story doesn't end here. The fall of one empire just sets the stage for the rise of the next one, the mighty Mughals. If you want to see what happens next, go check out the other explainers in our South Asia history playlist. And hey, if you like this one, do us a favor and subscribe to Notebook Summaries. Thanks for watching.